Hi everybody, this is a video that shows you the process of me beginning to paint some of the stuff going on in the background of this painting. Technically this video is terrible. I had problems with some of the cameras not working. I didn't realize that iMovie can't take more than 2 shots at a time, so I had 3 cameras that sometimes worked, but even if they did work, I couldn't use them all. Sometimes the sound quality was really bad. Anyway, I hope you find this helpful. I think the videos will be better as I get further down the road with this painting. I did some things differently, but in the meantime, here it is. Well, here I am ready to start on the next part of the painting. Finally got the sky done, and now the painting upright. I've got a camera above, got a camera over to my left, and I've got one zooming in a bit more on the right. And I'm hoping that everybody can see what I'm doing. I'm still trying to make this whole thing work, as far as showing you what I'm doing and making sure you can hear what I'm saying. And I'm going to be laying in some stuff that will give me some white stuff covered. In other words, when I see something like this, I tend to kind of freeze. You know, because you see all that needs to be done and it's just all white and it seems a bit intimidating. So even though I've been doing this for over 30 years, almost 35 years, I still have those same feelings. And, you know, you just get started. You just do something. There is something here that's a little bit tricky. There's a sign here, and then there are lights here. And other than that, there's a tiny little bit of light here and a little highlight to this edge of the rough here. And then there is a light right there, which I kept open with the masking when I was doing the sky. I think what I'm going to do, because I don't have a lot of tolerance for masking fluid, I'm just going to put a layer in. And my very time-consuming and conservative, cautious way of doing layers kind of frees me up to say, I'm just going to put down a layer. This isn't the final thing. This isn't going to be perfect. You know, I need to fix something. I can still do that. If it looks too grainy, it looks too brushy, I can put on more layers over the top that will fix that. In this case, there's a lot of dark stuff going on here. And this part of the painting, this roof turns blue as it gets further to the left. And I want to show that. Boy, that edge is not straight at all. Looks like I've been drinking, but I haven't. So I penciled a circle around where those lights are, and it's going to have a really hard edge for right now. But later I can soften it and make it look more like a glowing light. This edge right here is something I'm being more cautious with, because I want to preserve that hard edge. That's where that little highlight's going to go. Oops, I want blue, not gray. And I'm using a cheap brush right now. I'm experimenting with some synthetic brushes that, you know, they imitate the feel of a natural hair. And when I use a pointed, you know, really detail-oriented brush, it's never for something like this. This does come to a nice point, but it holds a lot of paint and I can go really fast. Also, I can get a nice solid color without any graininess by going this way. Instead of starting at the bottom and going up, there'd be a lot more places where the paint could dry. So right now I'm just laying down an initial layer of a blue-gray. It gets blue, more blue near the end. I think this building had a different roof put on. I think there's actually different metals, but it also is just lit up more. So it's lighter than it is over here. Now the top of that roof is going to have to be, in my mind anyway, it's going to have to be a nice, sharp, clearly defined, very straight edge in order for it to look like a building. If it was a barn roof, you know, an old rickety barn, it wouldn't have to be so straight, but this is obviously a more modern building. And so in subsequent layers, I will make sure that it's nice and straight. Right now it's pretty straight, but it's a little sloppy because it's my first layer. And I do want to make sure that I leave that little bit of paper open there. And I actually painted a tiny bit too much, but I noticed it right away. Now you can see over here, this is actually dry quite a bit. Now, I don't know which cameras are going to see all of this. The roof here and the bottom here kind of merged together. So I'm just going to start painting the bottom part up to the roof of this little car here. One of the things I want to do with this background, as I looked at the photo reference and thought about how I want to proceed, I really don't want to make the background look as particular. In other words, I want it to look like there's just this suggestion of things going on in the background, but I don't want there to be a lot of really clear information there, because I want it to recede. I want it to look like a bunch of stuff that's off in the background and it's very dark, because it is. And if I wanted to, I could go back to the original photo, and I could, in a program, you know, a editing program, I could make the darks lighter. And I could see things that I can't see in its normal state. That can be a helpful way to kind of see where you're going in the dark. But the other way of looking at it is, hey, just make it dark, you know, with a few highlights here and there that just kind of indicate, like right here, this is the hood and the windshield of a truck. Looks like a pickup truck. But I don't see the whole thing, I just see that little bit of highlight. And so that's what I'm going to allow to be seen in the painting, but otherwise I'm not going to actually try to paint the whole truck because I can't even see the whole truck. And the shape of this car that is closer to us, that shape will be more important to be careful about getting right. I hope that I do this car justice because I think it'll be a really interesting part of the painting, because it's a car on the road driving away, and it's hopefully gives a sense of scale to the road, you know, the feeling that it's a road of certain size. It's a big road. Another way of describing what I'm doing right now is I'm blocking it in. That's really what I'm doing. Now in the photo, I keep pointing up here, even though I have a photo here. Sorry about that. Sorry, that was dumb. There's a pretty clear line here and another line there. And I don't have to get those perfect, but that's what is going to give the impression of a road, which is horizontal, as opposed to all of the things in the background, which are much more in shadow. Hope you don't mind, I'm just talking through what I see and how I'm thinking as I do this. Some of what I will be painting, I'm not going to talk that much. It's a little square thing right there. I'm using Payne's Gray and some ultramarine blue, just left over from the sky. I actually should have gone darker, but it's just an initial layer, so it's okay. What do I do next? I think I'm going to get this dark part of the sign here, which is really dark. If you notice in my drawing, my underdrawing, I really don't have that much stuff going on. Because, like I said, this is the background. There's a lot of things that will be just sort of implied, but I'm not going to really paint everything real clearly, because you can't see everything real clearly. Yeah, there's another sign here that's also dark. The watercolorists who paint much looser than me, I like them. They would paint this much faster, and they would be implying detail much more loosely than I am. So in my mind, the way I'm doing this background is fairly loose, but really, it's all relative. Compared to the really loose watercolor painters who do an entire painting in just one sitting, yeah, I am still very fussy and they take way too long. Everybody has to find their place where they're happy doing what they do and they like the end result. Obviously there's a dark line here that doesn't really exist. This brush, by the way, is a Mimic by Creative Mark. It's a number 8 round. And it was an inexpensive brush. I think I got this the last time I placed an order at Jerry's Artorama. I've been more open to using synthetic brushes in the last few years. Just because I wanted to try, and they're not bad. And if this was a Kolinsky Sable round number 8, it would cost me, $80, I don't know, maybe $150, at least more than 40 or 50, I think. So I will be using Kolinsky Sable for the fine detail for sure. That's where I spend all the big bucks, 20 bucks, 25 bucks. But in all the years I've been painting, I've never spent more than $50 on a brush. And even then, I've only done that a few times. But if you got the money, go for it. You do tend to get what you pay for. I'm just blocking this in more. You'll also notice that as I'm doing this part of the painting, I am not using hardly any wet into wet techniques. I probably will a little bit here and there, but nothing like what I did with the initial layers of the sky. I do think that, for me anyway, if I'm working with some really murky colors that are dark, I, for the most part, have tended to add more color than I see in the original photo. And that's just a personal trait. It's just fun for me to add more color, but some people are much better at, I shouldn't say better, but they do tend to paint. The photorealist artists that I know, some of them tend to paint the grays and the dark tones as neutral as the photographs are. And I gotta admit, I kind of like that. So I do look at some of my paintings and wonder if I actually added too much color and made them look a little too artificial. Not artificial, what's the word? If the colors are super vibrant all over the place, I think it tends to look like an illustration or even like a cartoon. And having a number of elements in the painting where the colors are more neutral and just areas that are really full of intense color, I think that's the way the world tends to look in many cases. But I also can see how in making a painting that doesn't have everything vibrant, it has a lot more neutrals, and the vibrant parts that are there stand out more. Now here, this whole dark piece of this building turns into the background. There is no line there. We see it in our heads because we know there's a building that stops and then there's trees behind it. But we don't really see that division. So I'm not going to paint a division since it's just totally unnecessary. I do have little marks here that indicate the windshields of these vehicles, which I really like because that shows that there are vehicles there and the windshields are being hit by the sky, the reflection of the sun through the sky. So I will be careful to retain those things. Another thing that's going to be important for me is to make these darks back here really dark. Partially because I need to go over the sky with the same color, and this is obviously white here, so it's going to have a lot more layers before it matches the level of darkness where the sky is. But I'm making this blotchy already, just to keep my mind away from thinking that there's actually a straight line there, because there isn't a straight line there. I could be using a darker paint right now. I don't know why I'm not. Here's this diamond-shaped sign, which I obviously need to be careful not to paint over. There are these those construction caution barricades. That I could see in the projection, so there's lines here that indicate those. And there's actually construction barrels that I indicated here too. I'm not sure I want to paint those though. I just think it's too cluttered and confusing. So I'm just going to go right over those. I could add those in later. It's not like I'm making it impossible, but I don't know. I don't think I like them. This is all dark back here. And I'm not using dark paint. Come on, Kozar, get some dark paint. See why it takes me so long? I'm too cautious. I'm too conservative. I'm telling you, you're going to watch my videos and you're going to be saying, now I know what not to do. But a general rule here for the darks is these are really dark. These are pretty much black. When I was going to school at the American Academy of Art, they really discouraged us from using black for the most part. But there are times when there are things in nature, in the real world around us, that are basically black. They really are black. You don't have to use the black. It's, you know, it's a choice you make as an artist. But this is a painting that's supposed to represent a dark time of day, and you know, it wouldn't be wrong for me to use black. But it also would be okay for me to use more of a blue black or a purplish blue black, just because I like the colors. You know, I like it to be more colorful. So right now I'm painting around where these telephone poles are because I don't want to lose these lines. Even though you won't really see them much, I don't want to lose them completely. Especially the telephone pole here that has the, that looks like it's painted yellow, or maybe that's reflective tape. Let's get some more darks in here. That's the nice thing about having a larger brush like this. It holds more paint. You can get more done without having to reload your brush so often. Okay, looks like crap so far. I'm going to take a break right away because I want to check on the cameras and see if my head is in the way the whole time or if I did something wrong before I spend any more time on this. So let's take a little break. Okay, hopefully all three cameras are working. I'm going to put some more darks in, and I'm going to listen to my advice from the previous video. Get a little bit darker a little bit sooner. Hopefully get a little bit further along. I'm just using sepia and Payne's Gray. And remember, Payne's Gray is a color that isn't really a color. Every brand is a little bit different. But basically it's like it's a gray, which is kind of meaningless. It's supposed to be neutral, but it usually is a little bit leaning towards red, or a little bit leaning towards blue, or maybe even a little bit leaning towards green. I'm going to work on these darkest darks over here. And there is that clump of trees right there. I could be going like this, that actually makes more sense. Keep looking up at the one over there, which there's no reason for it. I have these photos. Take your own advice, Steve. Okay, Steve. So the dark of this tree is equivalent to the dark of this bottom part of the building and the sign. And I'm going to try to make that all just merge. I'm not going to try to separate them artificially, because that's not what we see when we look at something like this. It all kind of merges together. keep going over here. This is very blotchy looking. And that will be less blotchy as time goes by and I add more layers, more brush strokes. This is a construction sign that has letters that barely are lit up that says "Be alert," and I want to show that. But for some reason it's very dim in the photo, like the sign itself is not lit up all the way, and I kind of like that. It's kind of funny actually. Be alert, but you can't really see my, a sign is telling you to be alert at the same time the sign is so dim that you can barely see it, and how can you be alert if you can't see the warning? Yeah, it's not that funny, but it is a little funny. Now, one of the things that I'm pretty sure I will be doing after this is to come in here with a pencil and a ruler and just redraw some of these, the lines that are supposed to be really straight. I will draw them in pencil and then I'll have something to follow as I get into the next couple of layers. I do that a lot with buildings and things like that that require straight lines. Here. And some of this blotchiness is okay because it kind of gives the look of just stuff going on in the shadows. So I don't want it to be all perfectly, equal and smooth because it's a bunch of stuff going on in the shadows. So some of the blotchiness that you see right now I like, and I will preserve that. This is a really distinct hard edge to this car with a reflection. And it's an important part of this side of the painting. So some of the murkiness is okay, but where the light is hitting the car, I'm concerned about making sure that I preserve those edges and those highlights. My drawing here is kind of hard to see because of all the layers of the pavement that I painted earlier. It's got to be a nice bright red tail light right there, the back end of the car. Here's the back windshield of the car, which is really dark. And there's the somebody turning on the hose upstairs. Here's my mechanical pencil. There's the hose. And I just got a Kolinsky brush that has a little better control, actually a lot better control. So this top edge of the building, which you can see is, very straight. There is a line there left over from the original drawing. And I went over the line a little bit here with the paint. So I'm going to try and show you a fix for that. Just going to re-wet it and dab it up with a napkin or paper towel. There's only a couple of spots where the paint went obviously over the line. If it's a tiny bit wavy and a tiny bit imperfect, no big deal. But it's these little bumps sticking up that I wanted to try to minimize. And I might go over those and try to minimize them some more. But now what I'm going to do is the same thing you saw me do down here. I'm going to make this line more obvious. More obvious and easy to follow. And then this line here, I felt like the angle was a little off. It was a little bit different than the angle of the roof. But nope, it's right. So this thing right here is just I'm assuming it's the edge of the roof, and there's a light here that's lighting it up. And then we don't see it here because there's a sign that's closer to us, a dark sign. So all I want to do is get this kind of orange glow that gets darker and just fades into almost nothing. And there's a number of different layers that you could do to make that happen. For example, I'm wetting this down with just water. And it's lifting off some of that gray that I put earlier, which is fine. And I'm going to use some of this kind of murky violet color here to blend with that gray. And I just rinsed off the brush, so it's mostly water. It still has a little bit of color in it. And I'm just going to pull it forward and leave that white. And there's another little piece of gray there where I missed. I went over the line. You went over the line, Kozar. And I could try to nail that color exactly, which is a kind of a dirty yellow orange. And I'm going to start here with, I don't know if you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to start with this this yellow here. Give it just a touch of orange. I don't want to go too dark right away in case I'm off. I can always add more. But if I add too much right off the bat and it's too dark, I really can't fix it. And of course it's got to get a lot darker, and I like this kind of murky violet color here left over from doing the ground. And I'm going to use that while it's still wet. And the roof is not anywhere near as dark as it's going to be, so this is kind of hard to judge right now. I put some of this rose color right in the middle here. And now I'm going to add a little bit more of that yellow. It's not a real clean yellow, which is appropriate. It's kind of a little thing just getting hit by a little bit of light way off in the background. That was fun. So now that I have drawn that line there, I'm going to take that same, well, I don't have it mixed up anymore, but basically it was this kind of a middle gray. And instead of painting the whole roof, I'm going to find these spots where I didn't follow the line real close. and I'm going to only paint those areas. When you're painting transparent, and you put down one layer and you overlap it, the part that's overlapped is going to be about twice as dark. You know, here's one layer, let that dry a little bit, come back and go over it right away, and it just kind of all blends together. But if you do that over a layer that's dry, you're going to have twice as much value or darkness or intensity. So I don't want to create this dark thing on the top. I just want to try to make it all equal. But I will do another layer and then probably a couple more after that before this rough is where it's supposed to be. But I don't want to try to do this really careful edge all in a large layer, so I'm doing it now. This doesn't look that great. But boy, wait till you see this thing in about 12 years from now. or a little bit later. And this, these two lights going on here, just to be safe right now, I'm going to use this brush and I'm going to see if I can soften these edges a little bit. It's always better to have even softer edges than you see in the photograph, in my opinion. When you're trying to get the effect of a glowing light, hard edges really take away from that sense of glowing. So that's why I thought if I could soften these edges even a little bit, that'll help as I create the illusion a little bit more. This brush is too, it's flopping around too much to scrub. The shorter bristles allow you to scrub. If you're trying to scrub out a little color, this probably isn't much better. What I should look for right now is a small bristle brush, something that I would normally use for oil painting. Yep, I've done almost nothing. Here we go. This is really short. This isn't a bristle brush. It's very short. I just gotta rinse it out to make sure there's nothing in there. See if that'll do anything. Yep. Except I'm also getting some color inside, which I didn't really want. Yeah, I really should have cleaned this first with actual soap, just to be sure. But even now, it already is looking like something that's glowing a bit because I softened those edges. Okay, I'm gonna try to get, I don't know if you can see it in the video, but there's a line that's naturally going through this rough where there's one type of roofing here that's different. And I like that because that gives me an excuse to have a stopping point, so I'm not trying to paint the whole roof all at once. And if I go like this, basically take the edge that's here and just go along like that. It doesn't seem like it's angled enough. Yeah, I'm going to angle out a little bit more. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to paint, and it's the darkest part of the roof, right here. You know, I'm not sure that I want to make this different from that because it'll just look like, I don't know, two different painted sections, but whatever. For now, I'm going to do what I see in the photograph. Actually, looking at this photograph, there's writing on the roof. It's like a billboard, but I just can't make it out, and I'm not going to try to paint what's there. So I'll get this dark, mostly Payne's gray color mixed up into a puddle. I don't want to have a tiny little puddle and then frantically try to come back and mix it up again. So I'll make a puddle big enough for this one section. And I'm going to start here and work my way back. And I'm using a bigger brush because it holds more paint. And I can keep going without having to reload it. Sounds like a gun, reload it. Payne's gray is my ammunition. That was my impersonation of an old guy in a Western. Sorry. Yeah, this inexpensive brush is nice. It's not as good as a Kolinsky, obviously, but it's not bad. I'm sure that after I use it for a while, the point will wear off, which is something that happens in my experience. Synthetic brushes seem to, well, they don't have as good a point to begin with, but if they do have a good point, that point is going to wear out sooner. And it's a trade-off because, well, you didn't spend very much, so set aside and take out a different one. Maybe it only cost you $6, so it's not a big deal. But if you want total control, a sable brush is obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously. In my experience, the sable brushes have always been the best brushes. So there, I almost got the whole thing done without having to go over it and make it look too blotchy. And if I wanted to, I could actually go over it again with strokes that would simulate the look of this kind of corrugated roofing. So let's let that dry. I think what I'll do now is I'm going to add more darks below. Might as well. I've got all this Payne's gray mixed up. There's that really sharp edge again. And I do see some little changes in values down here that just give you the indication of objects. And I'm going to play with that a little bit and try to emulate the look of objects in shadow. edge of a vehicle right here. A windshield is hitting the, or being hit by the rising sun. Not really the sun, but just by the light is starting to emerge. And I'm going to add, obviously, color to these things that are being hit by highlights. It'll be most of them will have various shades of blue-gray. Because they're not getting hit by the warm sun, they're just getting hit by the light in the sky, not the sun itself, because the sun isn't up yet. And there's an edge of the pavement right here where there's a little bit of a driveway going into this building, and that's right here. So this edge here is going to be dark. And then there's this bit of ground here. And I'm seeing the pencil line that I drew earlier, which you probably can't see in this video because it's pretty faint. But I can see it just enough to follow it. And this goes to the issue of why didn't I get this road darker and do more of those multiple washes? Well, because I was afraid I would start losing stuff along the edges here, because I would just be getting everything so dark that I would lose the ability to see what I have in this underdrawing. In the car, I can see that, like right in the middle of the wheel is where this edge is. There's the middle of the wheel, so the edge is like here. And one of the things I do to see if my line is straight is either use a straight edge, but I don't really want to do that because I don't want it to be perfectly straight, because it's not. But if it's got an obvious dip somewhere, I can see that by looking at a very sharp angle. Okay. Let's just darken this a bit. The whole thing, now that I have the edge. The edge has been articulated. Is that the right word? The edge has been established. There we go. And this light area here is doing nothing, so let's get rid of that. Now let's darken this whole thing in.